Flying under the radar as of late is the new album from Blu, with the album being called The Color Blu, where every song references blue. Whether it's the color blue, the emotion, the feeling blue, or actually just being a metaphor or being self-referential to himself, who is called Blue. I'm not even joking, man. This album does a very good job of committing to the role. I like it when people commit to the role and do it well, because it just feels like that investment in this idea has been followed through from start to finish. And this man walked into the studio and said, I'm afraid I just blew myself. And it's pretty entertaining. It's surprising that the blue theme, the blue references don't get old quicker, because this is an album that is 40 plus minutes, not that long really, but when you're so stuck in your ways with, you know, referencing blue at every corner, at every possibility, you could imagine this getting pretty old, pretty boring, pretty repetitive. But I'm kind of impressed that he does a good job of keeping it pretty fresh throughout. I think it's fairly fair to say, fairly safe to say, that the opening track does try a bit hard, trying to nail in those blue references, trying to get those bars sort of fitting around his, you know, whole shtick, but it's still fun as hell, really. The beat's really great, he sounds great over this beat. He sounded really fresh over a lot of these beats, even more so than I think he was on the Blue in Exile album that only came out like last year. Not to say that that album wasn't worth anyone's time, it's obviously a good album, it was a solid album I think, but I feel like he's just coming at these beats hungrier and a bit more fired up, and I'm just kind of liking a lot of his flows and his bounciness across these tracks. He sounds energized, he's giving us such a bluesy bop with Everyday Blues, that great sample that comes in as well. Every day I have the blues. And the beat is so great. There's a bit of cheesiness to it, I'm not gonna lie, but I think it sounds really fun. One of the most entertaining moments on the whole album, and I think he keeps it going for quite some time as well, while also sprinkling in some really great lyrical themes. You Ain't Never Been Blue, which I think is a track that takes the perspective of, you know, some people have it harder and some people have it really tough in life, and you've just got to kind of think about things in that way sometimes, just to remember that maybe what you've got and the position you're in is far more fortunate than some people out there. I think he does a pretty good job of making this track well written, because I think sometimes this attitude can kind of diminish some things that people might be going through. You always get it from like parents or older people. It's like, oh, back in my day I had it harder than you, and it can sometimes just be like, well, yeah, fair, but you know, it doesn't necessarily mean it's easier for me or whatever. But I don't think he does that on this track. I think he just kind of paints a picture of how things can be for some people out there, without really any choice of their own. It's bluer for people out there, and this is where the album starts to get a bit more creative, I think, with the blue references, where, you know, it's not just the color blue. We are darker than blue, taking it in a more of a race direction. Sadly, one of the more confusing tracks in terms of some of the lyrics, because I feel like the MLK and John Lennon references are just a bit odd and don't really come together that well, I don't think. And I think overall this track actually could have just been written better generally. I don't think this one provides as much of an insight as some of the other ones. Oh, a bit of light came through. That was wonderful. It's a shame as well, because I feel like Blue has always been pretty good at these kinds of lyrical themes, touching on these topics, but I actually don't think this track comes together in a way that it could. But again, it's still taking the Blue idea and running with it and stretching it out as far as he possibly can. One of his best rapping tracks easily is Bluer Than Blue though. I mean, that soulful Bluer Than Blue vocal sample in the background that just kind of lingers throughout the track is really well inserted. Honestly, it sounds great. But yeah, his rapping here, Ah, God, I love it. He just sounds so damn good and fresh. He's really on top of his game with his rapping on some of these tracks, especially this one. I think he sounds great. People Call Me Blue is very much indebted to the classic days of hip hop. He's very much staying in his old head of ways with this one. The DJ scratches on the chorus. It sounds pretty good though. Once again, another track that just sounds really amped up and fun and full of energy and full of life, that I can't really reject it just for the fact that, it sounds too much like the olden days of hip hop, because sometimes that's a good way to approach a track in the modern day. I think if you just incorporate your influences well, I think you're gonna get a good song out of it, and this is a good example of that. It's not to say that it all works out well though, particularly with the instrumentals on this album. Mr. Blue Sky, you can obviously guess what the sample is without even hearing this song. I'm sure you're immediately thinking ELO, and yes, it is ELO. This reminds me so much of like when Frank did Hotel California on Nostalgia Ultra. I think that goes down incredibly well, and I feel like here it's just how it can go poorly, because I just think the sample just sounds really sloppy and just too on the nose as well, especially when you've had every track before it doing this blue thing and you've just got the bloody Mr. Blue Sky coming through. It just sounds really corny. Bro, a fucking orb just came out of nowhere. Look at this! Am I like being followed by ghosts? The track after this as well lacks the creativity again with the blue references. Like I did say at the start, it surprisingly doesn't get old, but it just gets a bit stretched out to the point where some of the lyrical ideas are just running quite thin. I still quite like the fact that he's trying so hard to incorporate this blue theme and doing it relatively well, but it just hits a point where he kind of hits a wall, and these two tracks just run out of ideas in terms of what lyrical angle he can take it from. He bounces back with the final track though. The closing track is great, Blue World, where he really digs in deep into how awful it can feel and how blue it can feel losing people and having people that are so important in your life, whether they're close to you or they're famous influencers that everyone knows. Stan Lee gets referenced at the end, Mac Miller, for example. I think this is a really good way to close out the album, especially considering the themes of the album really just kind of come together by the end here. Because like I say, it's very much about the emotional side of Blue things throughout this album, while also making nods to the color blue and himself blue as well. I think closing out the album like this in such a nice, dedicated way to all the people that we've lost is quite beautiful. It's actually quite beautiful. See, Blue, I can do it too. I should have wrote this album. But no, in all seriousness, a really good track. And yeah, maybe one of the highlights here. I can't help but just not get jiggy to Everyday Blues though. Every day I have blues. Really good album that has no right to be this good. It should get boring quicker than it does. Like I say, I'm impressed with this. It really keeps you on your toes. And kind of going a bit overlooked this year. I think maybe people might start picking up on it because, like I say, his album from last year caught a lot of traction and got a lot of critical acclaim. And it would be sad to see this one not get any positive reception, because I think it deserves it. It falls short of being great though, like I say, just slips up in a few places where I think it could have just been tidied up and the lyrical ideas could have just been stronger. I overall really like this though. It has no right to be as good as it is, like I say, but when you've got a talented artist like Blue behind this album, it can only go well, and that's why I've got to go 7 out of 10. Another strong hip-hop release for this year, to be honest. I feel like recently there's been quite a few that I've been picking up on and felt like they've deserved a lot more attention than they're getting and deserved a higher, warmer reception than they're getting too. And yeah, not really much else to add to that, but definitely check this out if you're a Blue fan. If you're not a Blue fan, check out Below the Heavens if you've never listened to that. That was from like 13, 14 years ago at this point. Classic hip-hop album in my opinion now. And he's still got it. He's still got it. He's still putting out good music. He's a good artist, and hopefully you check this out based on my recommendation. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my Patreon too, and goodbye.